Many people have become agnostics because of the supposed conflict between the Bible and science. In truth, there is no conflict at all between a correct translation of the Bible and really proven science, not just unproved theories. One of these supposed conflicts is between the fact that science knows that human beings have lived on the earth far longer than the few thousand years covered by the Bible, and the common belief that the Bible says that Adam was the first man. But the truth is that the Bible nowhere says that Adam was the first man. Yes, I know that most of the preachers say that, but the Bible does not say it. It merely says that Adam was the first man of a new white race. The many mistranslations in the King James Version obscure much of the truth. For example, Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, as though God made it all a complete mess. In the Hebrew, however, it says, now the earth had become chaotic and empty. For example, see Rotherham's emphasized Bible. That is, some early catastrophe had wrecked the earth, which was not without form and void before that. This was a judgment of God on earlier civilizations for their wickedness. Jeremiah 4, verses 23 to 27 gives us a vision of it. I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of the Lord and by his fierce anger. For thus hath the Lord said, the whole land shall be desolate, yet will I not make a full end. Therefore we do find buried ruins of cities older than Adam, and skeletons which can be dated by the carbon-14 process as many thousands of years older. But the Bible tells us about this. Next, the Bible tells the creation of men in the plural in Genesis 1, verses 26 to 28, saying, male and female created he them. And God told these people, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth. Plenish is an obsolete English word meaning to fill, and you cannot replenish what was never plenished or filled before. But in the next chapter, Genesis 2, we find the Adam in the singular created. The Hebrew word Adam, rendered Adam in the English, is from a root word meaning to be of a ruddy complexion, showing blood in the face. A word obviously not applicable to the dark races, which we also know from scientific evidence to be much older than the white race. And when the Bible is speaking of the particular man, Adam, who was created in Genesis chapter 2, it always says the Adam. Bible scholars know that Genesis 3, verse 20, and Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living, is a forgery, a later interpolation which was not in the earlier manuscripts. For example, see Moffat's translation. In Genesis 3, verse 3, when Eve tells Satan that God has said that they must not touch the fruit of the tree of good and evil, the word there translated touch is the Hebrew word naga, meaning to lie with, to have sexual intercourse with, which plainly shows that these were people and that there were other people in the world at that time. The 4th chapter of Genesis records the birth of Cain and Abel. In the Hebrew, the wording suggests that they were twins. No other child of Eve is mentioned until the birth of Seth, when Adam was 130 years old, certainly long after the birth of Cain and Abel, which most scholars say was over a century earlier. Yet, when Cain killed Abel, and in punishment was driven out of the land, he complained to God that anyone that findeth me shall slay me. That's Genesis 4, verse 14. Also, Genesis 4, verse 17 records that upon being sent away, Cain found in the land to which he went many other people, because he not only married a wife, but found enough people there to build a city. These were the pre-Adamite races mentioned in the latter part of Genesis chapter 1. The Garden of Eden was not a plantation of ordinary trees and shrubs. God did nothing so foolish as to make a special creation just to have a man to wield shovel and pruning shears, when he already had millions of pre-Adamite peoples available for that sort of work. We are told that the Garden of Eden contained the tree of the knowledge or experience of good and evil. Now, no tree of the forest has any knowledge or experience of either good or evil. And the 31st chapter of Ezekiel says, "Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon, with fair branches and a shadowing bough, and of a high stature. Therefore his height was exalted above all the trees of the field, and his boughs were multiplied, and his branches became long. All the fowls of heaven made their nests in his boughs, and under his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young, and under his shadow dwelt all great nations." The cedars in the garden of God could not hide him. The fir trees were not like his boughs, and the chestnut trees were not like his branches, nor any tree in the garden of God was like unto him in his beauty. I have made him fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of God envied him. Obviously, the trees in the Garden of God in Eden were family trees of races and nations who admired and envied the early Assyrian Empire, for an ordinary wooden tree can't envy anybody. These races and nations made up the garden that Adam was to cultivate. That is, Satan had been what we might call the superintendent or governor of this planet, to rule it in obedience to God's will, until he forfeited that position by rebellion against God. Adam was sent to take his place. It was Adam's job to rule the various nations and races of the earth as God's representative here, educating them in God's laws and enforcing obedience to those laws. These other races and nations had been here many thousands of years before Adam. Therefore, the Bible makes it unmistakably clear that we are not all descended from Adam and Eve, for there were other races on earth, already old, already numerous, when Adam was created. And among these other races, there are several who are simply pre-Adamic, and one at least which is satanic. If you will read the 3rd chapter of Genesis, you will notice that immediately after the fall of Adam, when God required them to answer what they had done, God condemned Satan. The word mistranslated serpent here is the Hebrew word nokash, which literally means enchanter or magician. And no doubt Satan, still possessing many of his angelic powers, was able to be an enchanter or magician. It is certain that the one who seduced Eve was no mere scaly snake wriggling along the ground. Yes, I said seduced Eve, for that is what she admitted in the original Hebrew, and Cain was the son of that seduction. The Bible uses the word begat with monotonous regularity in tracing family trees, but the first time the Bible ever says that Adam begat anyone is Genesis 5, verse 3, where it says, "And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth." But to get back to Genesis 3, verse 15, God said to Satan, "I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed." The same Hebrew word for seed is used in both cases. Satan was to have just as literal seed or descendants as Eve. God's own word being pledged to this, we must expect to find it actually happening. And we do. Jesus Christ himself tells us of it. In Matthew 13, verses 38 and 39, in explaining the parable of the tares among the wheat, Jesus says, "The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil." Again in John 6, verses 70 and 71, Jesus had been talking with his 12 disciples, and we read, "Jesus answered them, Have not I chosen you 12? And one of you is a devil." He spake of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, for he it was that should betray him, being one of the 12. And again you should read very carefully the 8th chapter of the Gospel of John, where Jesus told those who hated him, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do." He was not being vulgarly abusive in either of these cases, for he never resorted to name-calling for abuse. He did call some of them hypocrites, which they truly were, so his statement was precisely accurate. He did call some of them serpents, children of vipers, which again was accurate. Long before this, the children of Satan had adopted the serpent as a symbol or emblem of Satan, and that is why their tradition eventually gave the word Nakash the secondary meaning of serpent, when its original true meaning is enchanter. Jesus therefore was telling them that they were of their father the devil, or serpent if they preferred that word. In this he was simply stating a biological fact with scientific precision and identifying the persons of this ancestry. Whenever someone tells you that the Bible is in conflict with what modern science has proved true, don't you believe it. The things that many preachers teach are in conflict with scientific truth, as we all know. But these preachers are equally in conflict with the Bible. Go back to the Bible, not to any man-made doctrines, and double-check it for accuracy of translation. You will find that what the Bible really says in its original languages is accurate with a precision that our scientists have not yet achieved.